instructor, finding somebody who, is teaching online or nearby you who, again, kind of fits with what you're looking for. And I also would recommend kind of looking into maybe some community aspect, particularly if you're not going to be getting, a teacher, maybe seeing if there's a friend that you have who plays the instrument that you're looking to start up. So, you could, ask them questions of like, hey, I'm going to send you a picture of me holding this. Is this right? Am I holding this correctly? Or am I going to break my wrist 3 months from now because I'm holding it so weird? Looking at communities online, the Reddit has, ukulele subreddit, guitar subreddit, like there's and actually several guitar subreddits. Anyway, so options out there, but I see people post stuff all the time of like, hey, I'm like trying to figure out how to do this, like how are you guys doing it? I think having that is a really good thing when you are kind of starting at zero.
Right.
And then my third point is you have to practice and play. And I think maybe this one is maybe a little bit more specific to music there, although it can be easily converted into other hobbies as well. But I think it's really important to understand that there is a difference between practice and play. Practice is really taking that focused time to work on developing your skills. So, working on exercises to improve your speed and your tone and, all of those kinds of things. Or, working on a specific passage in a song that's difficult, a specific chord transition, something like that. Whereas, just sitting down and playing, is obviously good to do and important, and obviously is kind of the whole reason that you want to pick up the instrument, but recognizing that's not necessarily practice time.
Right.
If you're just kind of sitting and playing the stuff and having fun with it, and you might get to a point where you're like, I really don't care about learning other stuff and really developing my technique, and that's fine too. And kind of focusing to just like, I'm just gonna play these songs, I'm gonna play these chords and songs that I can play with these chords and just keep it easy and fun. But if you're really looking to develop those skills, making sure that you're spending consistent time practicing. And I will freely admit this is one I really fall into. I get really busy throughout the week with work and, as we kind of referenced earlier, some theater stuff sometimes in the evenings, and sometimes I get to the weekend, I'm like, oh, I haven't played it all. Well, it's fine. I'll play for an hour today. That's going to totally make up for me not playing this week. And that's a really bad habit to fall into though. Like you are so much better off playing 10, 15 minutes a day and just really being consistent. That's going to help you improve so much more. And also being really focused with that time. Example from when I was in high school, we had to do a senior project and I learned how to play drum set. Sort of learned how to play drum set. I didn't really, I faked it well enough to get past the project, but one of the things I would do is like I learned it has literally been so long and I learned this so poorly I can't even remember. I think it's called the 5-stroke roll. It's just like it's just like the basic thing that you do on a snare drum, and I literally just sat in front of the TV watching TV and like repeatedly doing that on like a notepad in front of me, and then totally called that practice time because you had to like get 100 hours or something. Right. And I was like, that's not, I mean, in some ways I guess getting muscle memory down I could make this argument, but like for the most part, like I called that practice time. That wasn't practice time. Like, and if you want to just like, sit down and like noodle around on the guitar or whatever while you're doing something else, like that's fine. But like also don't think like, oh, I just played for an hour today.
Right.
I'm gonna get so much. Like that's, if you're not really thinking about what you're doing, and again, if that's all you want to do, that's totally fine. But again, just kind of recognizing what it is that you're actually doing. And also kind of with the practice thing of, trying to keep it into those like, maybe smaller chunks throughout the week. I'm not sure that this is true for everyone, but certainly for myself, I think there's maybe some diminishing returns after a little bit. Because I think there's a point where I kind of just can't or don't want to focus on stuff after a little bit. So particularly if I'm focusing on like, one thing that I'm really struggling with, I after working at this and failing for 15 minutes, I tend to get a little frustrated and kind of have to move on to something else. And I think the, spending that time practicing it and then going away, doing other things, sleeping and coming back to it, like learning happens somehow in between, then and when you come back to it. So, spend it like, so again, kind of keeping that a little bit shorter, not getting frustrated. If you find yourself getting frustrated, just being like, okay, we're going to pause, we're going to take a break, we're going to do something easier with this or something else, and then come back to it. So, anyways, so those are kind of my 3 points of, so start cheap, start with a plan, and make sure you practice and play. Because I would also note play, obviously, I think it's really important for keeping your motivation and reminding you why you wanted to do this in the first place. And I think also just in general for anyone who's trying to start something and having a hard time, something I talk a lot about for various work stuff and productivity in general is looking at what effort hurdles are in your way and trying to figure out, okay, well, what can I do to overcome those? I kind of referenced earlier that I have all of my guitars hanging on the wall. I don't do that just so I look cool and impressive. I do that because before that I just had 2 guitars at the time, and they were in their cases in the closet, and I just never played them because out of sight, out of mind. And if I wanted to play them, I needed to like drag them out of the closet and get them out of their heavy cases and tune them, because I would inevitably knock pegs around putting them in and out of the case. And having them on the wall where they're immediately accessible, I can just grab them, I can play something quick, I can put them back. So looking at those things, like, are you not, or do you just not think to play? Like, put them somewhere more obvious, or do you not have a easy way of scheduling time, like taking a closer look at your schedule and trying to actually carve out that time to be like, I'm just gonna shut myself away for 10 minutes and do this thing. So anyways, that's my thoughts on that. Anyways,
that's awesome. I really like that. And I really like that, apart from practice and play, but practice that you can kind of relate that to, a different type of hobby, but all those are really good for like you said, just hobbies in general.
Yeah, I mean, kind of using knitting as an example, I don't practice knitting, but if there's something I want to know, I want to learn how to do, I'll spend the time learning, and then for the most part, it's just, I just knit,
Yeah.
But I think it, it kind of, you might have to structure this a little bit differently depending on the hobby and whether this is a hobby where you're really learning a skill or if you're just kind of doing a thing.
Right.
Yeah.
So now, let's say somebody doesn't have any hobbies, or their hobbies have become either just something in a different light to them, whether it's their hobby has now become their job, or, they're not interested in it anymore, or something like that. Would you recommend always having some type of hobby for self-care purposes?
Yeah, I would. I mean, I by no means, I'm not a mental health professional, but I think that's really important. Particularly the idea of their hobby has become their job. Mm-hmm. I think we're always, I kind of quipped earlier about how people think I'm really productive. In some ways, that's maybe not the greatest word to apply to hobbies, because they don't need to be productive.
Right.
I do make a lot of socks, but I feel like there is very much this feeling of oh, you're doing a thing, therefore you need to monetize that thing, or you're just wasting your time.
Exactly.
Because I can't tell you how many times I'll if I'm knitting something, somebody's like, oh, are you going to sell that? Why don't you have an Etsy store? I'm like, because I just want to like knit stuff and not have to worry about people complaining about it. Right. And I mean, it's the same thing with music as well, which I mean, admittedly, I have like, you know, I did sing with somebody for a while, and I did, you know, that was a little bit of like a side. That was my side hustle. but yeah, like, you know, people will frequently ask about like, oh, well, why don't you try to play, like, you know, play out places? And I'm like, because it's like that. I have a full-time job and it's stressful. And I also just in general find standing out in front of a crowd doing things stressful. So I don't necessarily, I like just kind of hanging out at my house playing, or like if, you know, if have somebody over, I'll play stuff. But yeah, I think I think it's really important to have those things that you do where, like, yeah, maybe you do feel productive, but not like productive in the sense of like, oh, this is going to earn me money, or this is, or, you know, fame and fortune, or, you know, whatever. Right. It's something that you do that you enjoy doing, and that like you are creating something that you're happy with. And even if that's, you know, something temporary, like I'm just going to sit at home and play a song, and I'm going to be really happy because I played that song and I sung along, or I made myself a pair of socks and I'm really happy about having this like lovely pair of wool socks to wear. I think that is really important. And I do think if you don't have any of those hobbies, I mean, I don't want to criticize anyone for not having hobbies, but I do think that is something to look into, because I think there's also, you know, I mean, I watch TV, I get very into horror movies, as we have discussed, but you know, and I think that stuff is fine, but I do think of that as a little bit different, and I think, you know, like movies and TV shows can be hobbies depending on kind of how you engage with them. Right. I just sit there and I watch them and I'm like, oh, good, entertaining stuff is happening in front of my eyes. Yay. I think there is something important about like having something that you creatively engage with, though. I think that's an important outlet for people to have, and I think maybe a lot of people don't have that. So, yeah.
So, now, let's say somebody wants to play music. They want to play an instrument, but they don't know what kind of instrument they want to play or where to start. Like, what would you suggest to them?
Well, a couple things here. So I think the thing that you probably want to be partially influenced by is like, well, what type of music do you listen to? You know, I think that can, and what kind of music would you think you would want to play? That could definitely influence the type of instrument that you decide to pick up. Additionally, I mean, you do want to look at things like budgetary constraints and stuff like that. Again, like I said earlier, like you can easily get a playable ukulele for $50. A playable guitar is going to run you probably a little bit more than that. And I will just be perfectly, I might offend the other ukulele players out there. Ukulele is just easier. Like, it's got less strings. It's littler. It's easier to pick it up and kind of get going on it. So I think, you know, thinking about some things like that as far as, so again, kind of maybe genre that you're interested in playing, kind of what your constraints are budgetary wise, time wise, how quickly you want to get up and running with something. Like, you know, do you want to be able to play a couple simple songs within a, you know, like a fairly short window of practice time? Like, ukulele might be a good option. Do you have, you know, a year to spend on something? I don't know, harp maybe, or something. I don't actually play harp. I just assume it's really difficult. It looks really difficult. You know, but you know, there are things where, you know, I mean, piano might be a little bit less in the range of possibilities for some people, just because you need more, even for a keyboard, you need more space than maybe some other things. So kind of taking those things into consideration. And yeah, I mean, there's no one right answer though for that one. Right. But I would recommend ukulele and guitar and mandolin, because those
strings. You recommend strings.
I recommend strings. Yeah. Well, and I do think there is, I think there's a little bit more opportunity to, like, like nobody ever comes over to my house and they're like, oh, I really want to hear you play flute. Nobody does this. Maybe it's because I don't have it sitting out obviously enough because it's in a case, but like people will come over and they're like, oh, that electric guitar, I want to hear that. That happens all the time. So if